Okay. Okay, and I believe we are recording. All right, very good. And we say hello to you from sunny Lubbock. This is Deacon Mario. First, Happy New Year's to all of you. This is going to be a little talk for the CTK Encounter series. And I'm going to present some slides. We are going to see a video. I'll share the screen with her both. To it, I'll get to it when we get there. But first, I want to preempt a little why we're doing this specific talk. And it's looking at evangelization in the times of fear. Okay. That can be kind of a little daunting, but I think it's an important subject, and one that potentially we're looking at putting together a series of, if you wish, recordings, classes, videos, whatever you want to call them, over the Lenten period here at CTK. And one of the things in talking both with Nathan Webb, also with Jeanette Harden, is after this video, and you're going to see this is just an intro to the subject matter, that we might look at setting up a small Zoom sort of discussion about what you're going to see, and we can talk about. A lot of us believe that this is a very crucial aspect facing our church. Okay, so without further ado, let me go ahead and I'm going to go ahead and share my screen, and we'll begin. Okay, I hope you all can see this. The church right now, and it has been for some years, it started back, believe it or not, with John Paul II, looking at the issues of evangelization. How do we evangelize? And there's been a number of things that are brought up, and a number of things that have been tried. Some with success, others kind of okay, and sadly a number who have not really done as well as we'd want to in evangelizing our culture, and trying to put forth the message that we believe is very crucial with respect to God and his kingdom. But look, let's first look at some of the things here. Right now, we're at the beginning of 2021. We've gone through probably one of the tougher years for many people. 2020 was definitely an interesting year, to say the least. And of course, just because one year ends and the other one begins doesn't mean that just everything is gone away. In fact, we still have many of the issues that we saw before, and we are still tasked with evangelizing in times of fear. Right? So that's why this talk is going to be looking at exploring, just initially now, but much more detail, the whole issues of evangelization and fear, especially this evangelization in times of fear. All right, I'm going to show you a video. Take a minute and show you a video. I want you to please pay attention to the statistics provided. Also pay attention to the underlying anxiety that is brought forth. And beware of the images that are being presented. If you want to, make note of them so that we can talk about those. Okay. Go ahead now and set up the video so that we can go ahead and see this. So, okay, here we go. Make sure that my audio is on so you can hear it. There it is. Okay, let's and see. By the way, these are two priests, and they present this because they were actually looking at, and you'll see this at the end, they're doing a walk to try to address this issue of fear and how do we evangelize. But I think there's a number of really important things that need to be looked at, and they present it, I think, very well in this video. So here we go.
I have today declared that the coronavirus presents a public health emergency in the United States.
China says the number of people infected.
All Americans have been warned. The city over the death of George Floyd.
In the scripture, God says to Moses, I have seen the affliction of my people. I have heard the cries of their distress. Today there's a whole nation in distress crying out for help. We know that this shout of pain is a symptom of a more vicious virus that dwells in the heart of man even before the pandemic. It's the virus of fear. We are all afraid. We're all weak. We all get very confused in front of the sufferings of our personal life.
When the virus spreading around the world, let's remember that fear is a virus too, and it can be just as damaging.
During this time, we see the effects of it more than ever.
Well, one way Americans are coping with the coronavirus, alcohol.
According to market research firm Nielsen, U.S. sales of alcoholic beverages rose 55% in the third week of March.
Coronavirus is weighing heavy on people dealing with substance abuse.
Rates and domestic violence on the rise because of the pandemic.
He says the amount of calls they've received from people considering divorce is twice as many compared to this same time last year.
There's a continued increase in the number of abortions performed.
Abortion clinic in Kansas reported an up to 400% increase in patients recently.
Coronavirus may be new, but it's triggering something downright primal in many of us: fear and anxiety.
Health experts say that the second surge related to the coronavirus pandemic could be a mental health crisis. Many have a lot to be worried about.
22% of Californians have felt anxiety at least 1 to 2 days a week. 23% say they have felt depressed.
Today, crisis counselors at California's D.D. Hirsch Suicide Prevention Center fielded an endless barrage of calls from people at their lowest moments.
In this graphic from the health department, you could see the increase in week-to-week numbers from February to March. The sharpest increase was 15 suicides within 14 days.
Yeah, these deaths of despair numbers are very unsettling.
Mentioned COVID-19 is going to exacerbate exponentially the amount of suicide.
I felt like a failure in front of my father. I couldn't live up to his expectations. I couldn't be the man that he wanted me to be. So getting high and drinking and running away and partying was my way of numbing myself and sort of killing my pain. This, for me, was the way I looked for help, you know?
I got divorced when I was 14 years old, but it feels like they've hated each other since before I was born. With this going on between my parents, it really numbed me. And it felt like the only emotion I could have was anger. I was very angry with my family, with the world, everything. I wasn't really living through life, but just waiting until the end of it.
When I got into high school, I began to become bullied. And I just felt like a tool to be used
as, a joke for others. Because of this, I couldn't stand life. I hated life. I hated everything. I hated everyone.
My dad died in 9/11 and when I was 7 years old. And he was a fireman in Brooklyn, and he passed away in the Twin Towers. In 2008, my mom was diagnosed with stage 4 colon cancer, and she survived for 5 years, but passed away in 2013 when I was 19.
We are a group of youth who have been beating ourselves of this virus of fear. In our personal sufferings, we have cried out, and God has listened to us.
Then it was announced to me that God loved me, that God loved me as I was, as a sinner, and I couldn't believe it. It was huge for me. It changed everything.
He was telling me that I was loved and that I was wanted. I felt a burden coming off my shoulders because it didn't feel like I was so alone.
I'm so scared of, people. I'm so scared of relationships. I'm so scared of letting myself be loved. But God showed me that there is love in this life. There's a purpose to my life. Today, I can smile.
I know that I have all the ingredients in my life that make a tragedy, but I know from the words I've received from the church, from God, that He is my Father, that the church is my mother. And I can see now today that my life has been a blessing. And it really brings joy to my heart.
Following the teaching of the gospel, where Jesus Christ sends the disciples 2 by 2 in mission, without money, without an extra tunic, to announce the resurrection of Jesus Christ over death, we ourselves want to go out in mission 2 by 2 to the cities of the United States from the 1st of July. In this time we will go out to the streets of America without bringing food, money, no cell phone. In our pocket we will have only a round-trip ticket. We will take the place of the poorest, and we will announce to them what the Lord has done for us in our lives. We will experience the providence of God, depending totally on Him. We want to be witness to the resurrection of the love of God in this time in which many people are disoriented, are confused, are afraid.
Okay. Interesting little video, isn't it? Let's get back to our slides here. I'm going to share those again. Okay. All right, so let's continue with this. I think they did a very interesting job, and you see that they had a specific mission. But let's look at some of the things that they talked about and explore them a little more to see how truly relevant they are. Okay, normally when I've done or do this, I would have some group time for us to talk about this. Then we can do that maybe later. This right now is a recording, so that you can see this. And one of the things that I always ask is, why this video? Why should I do this? But let's look at some of the things that were brought up. And again, some of this data is still being collected. When it was first done, this is at probably September, October. Some of the things that I've got here, and they're still being collected more. I'm doing some more research on the collection, but let's just look at what we have until then, right? COVID-19, we had an issue of divorce rates, right? That were, escalating, increased to 57% compared to 2 months prior. again, more stats, right? COVID-19 pandemic is tearing up families, right? So 45% of couples pursuing a divorce have children under the age of 18, a 5% increase since 2019. Quarantine, in many ways, from the initial data, was sort of a home breaker, especially for, believe it or not, newlyweds. Kind of interesting. You can see the data there. And so, believe it or not, the region where we're in, Texas, the South had the highest of the increases, where couples pursued divorce rate at 2 to 3 times that of other regions. Kind of interesting. So we can't deny this is affecting us specifically in Texas. Mental health issues, right? During late June, 40% of U.S. adults reported struggling with mental health and so no denying that the data is there. All right, and so suicide rates since COVID-19. There will still be a while before the COVID-19 actual impact on the nation's suicide rate is known, said Jill Hackenberg Friedman, PhD, Vice President of Research at the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention. We're 2 years away from having full data, because of course it takes some time to go through that. And, some people are going through some harsh issues still, right? He says, and it is not given that the pandemic will cause suicide rates to increase, emphasized Hartley Friedman, who is also associate professor of clinical psychology and psychiatry at Columbia University. One event can bring stress, but is not going to make someone suicidal out of the blue, she says, explaining that it is typically a combination of biological, psychological, and environmental and other factors that render people vulnerable to suicide. Take the Great Recession of 2008, she points out, about 4 million people lost their jobs, and the suicide rate didn't skyrocket. She says, we're more resilient than people give us credit. But interesting, though, we have seen numbers here, and part of it too is it's just potentially possible that it's not just one thing, COVID, but other things as we've seen going on. So let's look at this issue of fear, right? And again, in an initial way, we'll maybe hopefully explore it more later, but fear is an emotion induced by perceived danger or threat, which causes physiological changes and behavioral changes, such as fleeing, hiding, or freezing from the perceived traumatic event. Fear in human beings may occur in response to a certain stimulus occurring or in anticipation or expectation of future threats perceived as a risk to oneself. The fear response arises from the perception of danger, confrontation with, or escape from avoiding the threat, also known as fight or flight response, which in extreme cases, fear, horror, and terror, can be a freeze response, paralysis. In humans and other animals, fear is modulated by the process of cognition and learning. Thus, fear is judged as rational or appropriate, and irrational or inappropriate. And of course, an irrational is called a phobia. Fear is closely related to the emotion anxiety, which occurs as a result of threats that are perceived to be uncontrollable or unavoidable. The fear response serves survival by engendering behavior responses. So it has been perceived throughout evolution. Sociological and organizational research also suggests that individuals' fear are not solely dependent on their nature, but are also shaped by their social relations and culture, which guide their understanding of when and how much fear to feel. So, let's look at some of the important points of fear if we're going to be potentially looking at this. Fear, of course, if we sum it up, is an emotion. Emotion to, there's a perceived threat that can cause both physiological and behavioral changes. It responds to stimulus of expectation of risk, modulated by cognition and learning. And, some of these would be very critical to us. That's one of them that we sort of explore. Can be both rational or irrational, closely related to anxiety. A fear response can serve for survival purposes. It has a very valuable function in all humans and all the animals. Is not solely dependent on a person's nature, but is also shaped by, and here's important, social relations and culture. And so one of the things that I'd like to sort of look at and talk about is understanding this and better understanding fear. And what we are tasked with as Christians, as Catholics, is how do we evangelize people? And one of the critical questions that needs to be asked and sort of think so much, when we say evangelization, what are we trying to evangelize? What are we evangelizing? What is it? And ultimately, one of the things with fear, and if you look back at this social relations and culture, is fear is a very big thing when one is or feels. So, big thing here for us to explore is how do we build social relations and culture that evangelize what we are trying to evangelize, which is Jesus Christ himself, right? So I want you to think about this. This is something that we need to maybe have a little bit of an exploration and talk with. And the question then stands, right? Evangelize our communities in times of fear. And, throughout history, we've had fear, people all fear, but there are times that have been a little bit more intense. And I don't think it's a far stretch to say intense times in the last year or so. So we'll be exploring this and looking at how we can approach these things. So look, hey, in finalizing this, I certainly don't do it to scare you or stuff. We have to face this reality. This is an issue that we have very present in our current culture, and we are tasked to evangelize. So think about this, and if you would like to sit and visit about this, have a Zoom talk, please go ahead and contact Nathan and Jeanette. Most probably Jeanette. She's the one sort of organizing some of this, and we'll see if we can have a talk and maybe get some input on some of the things that we're looking at preparing for some of the classes on looking at evangelization in times of fear. Well, with that, we'll conclude this and basically say it's been a pleasure, and we say goodbye to you from sunny Lubbock.